A very special cast here for the very first edition of Open Court Owners. Our collective net worth has shot up dramatically here, and we're glad to have all of you with us. Let's introduce everyone. First, from the Dallas Mavericks, it's Mark Cuban. Hey, from the LA Clippers, it's Steve Ballmer. Jeannie Buss, second generation of ownership from the LA Lakers. Joe Lacob from the champion Golden State Warriors. Tony Ressler of the Atlanta Hawks. And Dan Gilbert of the 2016 champion Cleveland Cavaliers. All right, Joe, champions first. How do you view your role as an NBA owner? In other words, what is your job?
That's an interesting question. I don't know. I view my job from my standpoint is to win again. I mean, that's what we work on. I haven't even had a chance to enjoy it, to be honest. People think, oh, we're just partying and all that, but the truth is, we went right from that to the parade, the draft, free agency. You know, I'm always focused on the job, and the job is to continue to get our organization better.
Tony, what do you think? What is your job?
Well, my job is a little different than Joe's job, I think, because it is, in fact, to win, but maybe not with as an immediate an approach. It's been 49 years in Atlanta since they've won a championship.
Right.
All right, and we haven't had, I should say in Atlanta, we haven't won a championship. St. Louis.
Right.
The St. Louis Hawks won a championship. So we've had 49 years in Atlanta without a championship. So I have a job, which is to create a championship culture. It's not done overnight. It's not done in a period of weeks or months, but with the right focus, it will be done. And that's what I'm there for. It's going to be a focus that I did not appreciate the amount of time and effort that is obviously required. And you get to see that when you see great franchises that have built championship cultures. We have a little bit of work to do, but we have a path that we know what to do, and we plan to go after it.
Well, Jeannie, you obviously have been a part of championship culture with the LA Lakers. How do you, as an owner, affect change toward that goal?
What I think the role of an owner is to put together all the pieces. We're the producers. We put everything together so that the team can be the best that they can be, that they can meet their expectations of who they are as players and maybe even exceed them and come together as a team. And winning a championship is really difficult. It's really hard, and every year that's your goal. But it's, you know, great competitive ownership groups all doing the right things. We just try to, you know, put together the pieces and hope for the best.
Dan, what is the job description of an NBA owner?
Yes, you know, it's funny you asked that question because I was just talking to Joe right before we went on the air here. In every other business in the world almost, the number one complaint of the person who either owns a business or is in charge usually is that they're too much of a micromanager. They're too much involved. They need to let things go. In the NBA or sports, I guess in general, if you're an owner, the second you cross the line into the arena, you're meddling, and you need to stay away. You know, so I guess it depends on who you ask, right? And you know, but I would say I agree with the owners here. I think that number one, setting a culture, you know, which in most businesses today is probably, you know, the number one thing. I think years ago people didn't talk too much about it, but culture's everything. And I think, you know, determining obviously the financing and backing the business with what the capital it needs, like any other business. And unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on if you like it or not, there'll be certain hard decisions that have to be made. And hopefully you can do the work that you make more right ones than wrong ones.
Steve, it's interesting. You don't play, you don't coach, you don't scout, you don't individually sell sponsorships, any of that stuff. So what is your job?
Pick up on where Dan left off. There are big decisions that are only the owners to make. Big financial decisions, whether it has to do with roster or whether it has to do with building a new arena or remodeling or whatever you're going to do. Those decisions, they're non-delegable. They're non-delegable. You go to your team, your leaders, but they know it's your money, so they're going to need to ask you. The owner's the only guy you can count on being around in 5 years. If you just look at the longevity of people enrolled, the owner's the person who's going to be around. So who has to make the commitment to the organization about what it wants to be and why you should be there? It's on the owner, because the players can turn over, the coach could turn over, The front office staff can turn over. Now, it's nice if you can do it, you have 15, 20 years in a row. That's the way it's nice to run any business. It's just probably not as realistic, particularly with the players. It's not as realistic.
When we bought our team 7 years ago, the number one thing was to set a vision and a culture, as you point out. But the most important thing, and it's like any other business really, is to hire the right people to do the job. We're not going to do none of us do all the work. We don't do the job, but we have to hire the right people. That is our most important thing. Now, this issue of meddling, which has come up a couple times now.
By the way, you don't hear, is there any other business, that word, maybe the Joker on Batman, he meddled, you don't really, when have you ever heard that
The
word?
villains on Scooby-Doo were
Yeah,
often
maybe he's meddling.
meddling
It's
kids,
a word
yeah.
that only goes with ownership of sports.
Dan and I were talking about it. The truth is, the best owners, I think we believe, are those that are very involved. They do not micromanage.
Right.
That's the key, right? We don't micromanage, but we're very, very involved and know all the details.
What's the time commitment in terms of what you do on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, particularly for someone who has other business interests?
So I think it ebbs and flows, and I think, again, what Joe was saying, I think whether or not you're a senior level meddler or you're just a mid-level meddler, it depends on how much you want to, but generally I agree with what you're saying. I think the successful teams over the years, and I think, if you look at the Lakers, even, I think, your father was involved with the team. And I think, the teams that have won a lot of championships, usually there's involvement. I like the way you were saying there's involvement, but not, detail on every single little thing involved. It's hard if you're paying people for the value of their judgment, you gotta let them judge.
We'll get much deeper into the decision-making and or meddling, as the case may be, of an NBA owner as we continue from Las Vegas.
I'm glad that you're in the league.
Me too.
But we did have to change rules. We had to say, as an owner, you cannot sign yourself to play on your team.
Because it was a concern.
So we had to add that rule, the Mark Cuban rule, so you couldn't sit on the bench with your team wearing a uniform.
Back in Las Vegas with our owners here on Open Court, and the question for the six of you, and I'll start with you, Tony, because you recently did this. If you're hiring a president of basketball operations, or whatever the title might be, what are the qualities you're most interested in?
Well, for me at least, a president of basketball operations, a head of basketball operations, a general manager is all the same. You own basketball personnel. Your job is to make sure we have the best players on the court, the best players that we can develop for the future. So your job is all about players, and a coach's job is to win every day as much as possible. So I do differentiate between the two, of course. I've learned that over time, a relatively short period of time. But I am a big believer that a general manager, head of basketball operations, president of basketball operations is all about understanding and not just what makes a good basketball player, of course, now, but I would also say, which I did not appreciate when I came into the league, how tough it is when you're drafting kids that are not 21, 22, but actually 18 or 19, and expecting them to be great ball players at 22, 23, 24. So you're really trying to figure out how a kid is going to develop 5 years forward. Hard to do. Hard to do.
To me, it's more than just evaluating talent, purely doing that. That's a huge part of it, but I think creating an environment that other people can grow and that allows new ideas and innovation to come. And that's another thing. I think for the first time, not saying for the first time, but I think more and more in this league, and especially in the last 2-3 years, you're seeing more innovative approaches, more different approaches, sort of the rejection of the automatic status quo of the way it's done. I mean, at the end of the day, 96.7% of the teams end with a loss. Only 3.3% win the championship.
Otherwise known as one.
Yeah. One. So, it's, there's a lot of things that have to come together to win a championship, that's for sure.
He brought up meddling, and there's a perception among ownership that you're involved or you've crossed a line and you've gotten into meddling with your basketball people. And obviously you leaped over that line a long time ago, Mark. So
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to think I invented meddling, but Jerry Jones actually did. And it was funny. I remember Dave Checketts, who was running the Knicks at the time, asking me, are you going to be like that other owner in Dallas? And this is in the end of 1999, right? And I'm like, I hope so. He's selling a whole lot of tickets, and he just won 3 championships. And they really were vocal in their expectation that I would be quiet.
Yeah.
And really, your dad.
Yeah, my dad, went to bat for you
Yes.
because he was very similar to you in '79 when he was trying to get in. You guys were about
Yep.
the same age. There were a lot of owners who did not want you in the league. But I do have to comment that I'm glad that you're in the league.
Me too.
But we did have to change rules. We had to say, as an owner, you cannot sign yourself to play on your team.
Because it was a concern.
So we had to add that rule, the Mark
me, it
Cuban
was
rule,
not.
so you couldn't sit on the bench with your team wearing a uniform.
Well, yeah, I mean, I didn't go that far, but, when Michael came in and said, well, they said, what kind of owner are you going to be like? And they're like, I hope it's Mark Cuban. I was like, okay, Michael Jordan. Now I finally made it.
We had to look at a general manager. And I went and interviewed, got all these recommendations from around the league and interviewed all these guys, and I didn't like any of them. And I think I wound up hiring a guy that really hadn't done it before, that was a player agent and who had this one great skill set for sure. He had played and he knew basketball, but he was a great, negotiator. But really, what turned out to be the most important thing is how well does he get along with me? Because I'm involved. It's, I'm the managing guy for the team, the owner, and you have to be able to work well with your general manager. You have to get along. You have to see eye to eye. You don't have to agree on everything, but you have to be able to communicate. And so at the end of the day, I look back at Bob Myers, who I think is the best general manager in the game.
Because he gets along with you.
That's along with me. But he
Apparently
won
a
the
rare
award 2
thing
of the
or
last 2
something.
years. But here's the truth is, we get along great.
I don't allocate an enormous amount of importance to how my GM gets along with me. I allocate so much more. I consider the vision. Do I follow what he says? Do I get what he's trying to do? And do I understand where he's trying to take our franchise? And for me, that has so much more value because, frankly, the concern I would have for people that, where you put too much of a role in how we get along, how you communicate, I get.
Right.
But how we get along, to me, I want a GM that really has a vision. Now, granted, our franchises might be slightly in different places, but a vision is so important to me.
When I first got there, I was like, I can't just go out and hire new people because I don't know what to hire for, right? So I'll keep the people that are there. And I learned very quickly and very expensively that the number one job of a general manager is not to win championships, it's to keep their job, right? And they'll do it and they'll spend your money in any way they can in order to keep that job. And it cost me a boatload of money early on. And then I started, from my perspective, again, we're all different, that there were certain skill sets I started valuing more and more and more. Right? I remember walking to a scouts meeting and our war room, right? And we had all of our players all lined up for the draft. And I'm like, okay, well, tell me what you think about all these. And I'd read some scouting reports. He goes, I like him a little bit. I'm like, look, anybody who says I like him a little bit, you're immediately fired, right? If you can't take a position. And so I started recognizing that, to me, the number one, the most difficult skill set in basketball is talent evaluation. And then from there, you start working out. Because if you can't evaluate players well, doesn't matter what you negotiate, doesn't matter how good your coach is, doesn't matter how good your general manager is, you're going to suck. And you're going to suck for a long time. And you're going to get upside down because if that general manager is just trying to keep their job, you're overpaying players. And with the cap rules, you're stuck. And I got stuck.
You want somebody who's pretty creative because there are multiple options open at all times. The ability to stay disciplined. If you have a plan, oh, no, we could win 2 more games this year. Oh, God, if we just win 2 more games, we could deny all flexibility for the next 3 years, but we win those 2 games. So
He's going to win a game for us. Yeah, this guy will win a game for us.
A little discipline, a little creativity, because by the time you get down to some guys, then I don't have an opinion. If it's a max guy, I have to have an opinion. Right. If it's a major roster shift that our fan base is going to be up in arms about, got to have an opinion.
For me, it's about being of like mind and like Joe was saying, that there's communication, collaboration, and recently I made a big change and brought in Magic Johnson as the president of our basketball, and it's about having a vision and then making every decision that reflects that vision. And what was missing with our team for a few years was we were changing coaches every 18 months. Emphasizing defense, then emphasizing offense. And like the roster can't change that quickly. So it just seemed like we were spinning our wheels. So what I want to see is just a process where every decision complements the one before, and that we're going in a direction that our fans can understand and be patient, because you can't win every year. But if you know that they're not wasting money, you know, signing bad contracts that get you stuck. And I think I have that with Magic Johnson.
Interesting perspectives and really varied approaches to that question. Lots more of that coming up. Open Court Owners continues from Las Vegas after this.
I'm not a believer in bad luck, good luck. I choose not to live my life that way. I think you make decisions, you put yourself in a position to succeed or fail. It's just the way I choose to live my life, and that's what I believe.
We're not talking about living our life. We're talking about the realities of the NBA.
Back on Open Court, the Owners Edition. As you guys know, you can be a mediocre team in the NBA and still do pretty well as a business. There's that old idea that you either need to be a contender or really bad to try to get yourself back to being a contender. So what's the cost-benefit analysis of breaking it down completely or being a playoff team on an annual basis?
We've been in the playoffs for 10 straight years. Atlanta hasn't won a championship, as I mentioned, in 49 in the city of Atlanta. Our job is to try to win a championship. We saw a team that was getting older and not getting better. So we think getting younger, we don't use the rebuild term, but getting younger and still being incredibly competitive, playing hard, but being young and fun, but getting younger clearly, is a method by which we could take, hopefully, a small step back in an effort to take a huge step forward.
How do you view that decision? If you're not a championship contender, you're not the worst team in the league.
I always judge it by how many sprained ankles or broken legs we are away, because things change, right? Kawhi Leonard doesn't get hurt, could be a different ball game, right? We had early on in my career, Dirk. We're in Game 6 against who's left? We're in Game 6.
I'll stick up for Kawhi and the Spurs, even if Joe wants to roll his eyes. It could have been a different deal.
But you just never know, right?
You don't know.
You just don't know, right? And so, you know, early on with me, we've Game 6 against San Antonio, and Dirk gets hurt, right? We're whooping them, right? And we end up losing in the conference finals to them because Dirk doesn't play the last 2 games. And so it's so tenuous that up until recently, I was like, look, you play it out. You see what happens. The year we won, we were 29-4. Then Caron Butler dislocates his kneecap, done for the season. Roddy Beaubois, who was our backup point guard, breaks his foot and his hand, done for the season. But we kept on playing it out, and we ended up getting Peja, who could barely walk, and he has a big series for us against the Lakers, and everything turned from there. And so just, you know, I've always taken the approach that if you put yourself with a chance to get lucky, put yourself with a chance to succeed, anything's possible because somebody gets hurt, right? But at some point you have to be realistic, you know, and you have to start looking to the future. And I think that's where we are now. And trust me, going into last season, and we won 33 games last season, I thought we had a chance to be a 50-win team and maybe make an in-season trade and compete. But what changed was Dirk gets hurt. You know, 4 of our top 6 guys get hurt, and we start off 3-16. And then from there, you know, the script was written, and we had to do what we had to do.
My second year in ownership, we have a good team, really good team. 1 playoff game, we lose Chris Paul and Blake Griffin to injury in 1 game. So
everything's different.
Any notion we had of our season pretty much changed.
And you think if they come back healthy,
game.
Yeah, and when they're healthy, you get another shot at the next year, right? And you just don't know, right? And look what happens again.
The first year in the trilogy, we lose Kyrie Irving when we're up 2-1 in the finals, and we lost Kevin Love against Boston in the opening series. I mean, you're right. I mean, injuries, luck, it impacts it. But I think over the long term, if you have somebody who judges and values or creates value over time, it's like that thing over time. You know, an investor over time is going to do better who does the work than somebody who doesn't. You're just not going to win all the time. You can't win all the time.
Injuries, clearly. I remember the Clippers. I mean, that was terrible in 1 game for that to happen. That's bad luck. I mean, I agree. We were having this conversation before. I'm not a believer in bad luck, good luck. I choose not to live my life that way. I think you make decisions, you put yourself in a position to succeed or fail, it's just the way I choose to live my life, and that's what I
Yeah,
believe.
we're not talking about living our lives.
But-
We're talking about the realities of the NBA.
No, but I do think that some teams are successful for a long period of time because they run a good operation. It comes down to how you run your operation, who you hire.
Jeannie, I want to get back to the topic of the calculus of the business of basketball as an NBA owner versus basketball business, if you will, and competition, how you decide, okay, we could be okay if we make these decisions, or we could take the longer view and try to get back to where the Lakers have been.
Well, the way I was brought up, the way I was trained was that, you know, you always want to be in the playoffs. You always want to stay relevant. You want your team to, you know, a bad year would be losing in the second round, and a great year would be winning a championship. You can't always do that, but you have your players have to have playoff experience. It's a different game in the playoffs. And so these teams that say, hey, you know, we need to tank and we need to get really bad for a long time,
Mistake.
their players aren't gaining any valuable experience. You're wasting the time, maybe even doing damage to their psyche if you have a coach who can't, you know, you're not allowing him to win, or you're not supporting him in winning and giving him what he needs to do the job. You know, I think that teams that, you know, want to get to the bottom, they're just prolonging their own agony. That you should have the goal of getting in the playoffs, and then things can happen. Like Mark said, you know, it's one broken hand, one bad knee away, and then you pull an upset, and the players gaining that playoff experience is like money in the bank, because then they can pull on that and they grow and they come together as a core. And the teams like San Antonio that keeps a core together, that can be great for 5, 6, 7, 10 years like they have. I think that's what really.
But remember, they tanked and got David Robinson, right?
That was luck.
And Tim Duncan, Dan, right after that, Tim Duncan, right? When they didn't have the worst record,
right?
They leapfrogged over Boston to get Tim Duncan.
Mm-hmm.
When he was in, when David
1 year.
Joe, that may have been
broken leg of David Robinson went from 62 and 20 to 20 and 62.
No, but I mean, even just this year with, you know, we took a lot of criticism because we won 5 of the last 6 games, and you know we had to like thread the needle because our draft pick was only top 3 protected,
you talk
and
about
we
luck,
finished with the 4th worst record. We shouldn't have kept that pick, and we got lucky. And you know, Magic Johnson's lucky.
Okay, there was a lucky break in the beginning of the San Antonio, you know, 20-year.
No, and they give credit for Kawhi,
but
right?
you can't sit here and say that they could have made any number of bad decisions over the course of 20 years.
No question.
Bad coaches. I could name a million things they could have done that would not have enabled them to be as good as they've been for 20 years. So that's why I don't buy it. There is luck.
Yeah.
But it's just, there's so many different things that can happen at each luck point or unlucky point.
Sure. We've got lots more with our owners here on Open Court from Las Vegas after a bit.
We're going to go through a complete transformation of our business as the media business transforms over the next 10 years. And we're going to talk about it in meetings. We're going to brainstorm it, talk about it outside of meetings. And you can say, hey, that's not the basketball side, and it's not. But remember, we're partners with the players. It's our responsibility to try to keep growing the revenue.
On the phone, Dan, to Adam Silver, good or bad?
Oh man, that's a great question. It's not the referees. I'll tell you that. I didn't say I wouldn't want to call them, but it's not. I don't do that. I think, you know, just sometimes when you see things, you know, that can improve the league, you know, you have a thought or an idea. You know, I think our owners are way more vocal. I've been doing this for 12 years now. I will tell you, I think it's night and day. One of the things I was really surprised with, you were there, Mark, and obviously, Jeannie, you were there. The first couple of years, I was shocked at how few owners literally even spoke.
To each other?
No, at the meetings. At the meetings, there were
Except for me.
Except for Mark. It was like Mark and David talking to each other. We were like, wow. It was like a tennis match you're watching. But today, you know, I'd say most owners at least.
Yeah, you guys come in, everybody.
And people are talking, and ideas are coming out, and I think Adam's culture that he said is really a positive one that's open for feedback. I mean, and he will take a point of view, but he listens, and I think it's a healthy environment. I mean, I think it's interesting.
Steve?
Yeah, I mean, for me, there are kind of one or two things that would get me to call Adam, and not refs or any of that. If it looks like, you know, sort of things that are not fair are happening, you know, tampering is an issue. You've got people have rules in terms of how you comport yourself, and I think it is important that discipline exists in the league. That'd be certainly an area. And then number two, as Dan says, there's a lot of suggestions. We're going to go through a complete transformation of our business as the media business transforms over the next 10 years. And we're going to talk about it in meetings. We're going to brainstorm it and talk about it outside of meetings. And you can say, hey, that's not the basketball side, and it's not. But remember, we're partners with the players. It's our responsibility to try to keep growing the revenue, which will also keep growing, you know, revenue or salary, et cetera, for players. So in a sense, it is part of our obligation to the game, and the success of the game is to grow the revenue.
All right, Joe, if you were commissioner for a day or a year, what would be your first acts on the job?
It's a tough job. I think Adam is a very, very good commissioner.
Yep.
I think we'd all sit here and
Yes.
say he may be the best commissioner in sports.
Yes.
Without question.
By
He
far.
he so promotes dialogue. I don't have a lot of complaints about him, to be honest. And by the way, this question of, you know, what gets you on the phone, I actually don't call him. I text him, actually. I text him.
Nobody calls each other anymore.
We Snapchat.
Yeah. But I text him a little bit on an issue, back and forth, so I make sure I understand what he's really talking about. I think he's just so open. I don't think we can have a better commissioner. I don't want to be the commissioner, so I've never thought about that question, to be honest with you.
He's got 30 folks telling him what to do or what not to do often.
30 opinionated.
30 geniuses.
Highly opinionated folks. And from my experience, at least, what I've seen about Adam, which makes him, I think, that rare executive, and certainly in sports, but maybe in any business, he sees the macro. He's looking and trying to get input on where the NBA is going to be in 10 years, and are we positioned to get there? So he's very focused on, to me, the macro, the long term. And yet, when I call him, which I do on in Atlanta, we need to redo and are redoing our arena. We need to build a practice facility. We need to refurbish or help to transform the entire downtown of Atlanta to make it a cool place for people to come 2 hours before a game, stay 2 hours after. And I'm asking him, is this normal? Is this consistent with what 29 other franchises are doing to run a better franchise? And I must tell you, he's giving me that best practices of, you've got to do this. Look what the guys are doing in Golden State, what the folks are doing in Memphis, what people are doing to develop their areas, their downtowns, if you will, to be a force of good in the community. That's important. And Adam has a sense of that, because from his seat, he sees a lot of good and not so good, and he's able to pass on the good, and that's an important function.
He knows how to be tactical and strategic.
You bet.
And that's very difficult to do.
You bet.
Just so we're on the record, nobody wants to be commissioner, correct?
No.
Too hard.
You sure? Okay, all right, good.
Trust me.
Wouldn't be as good as the current guy.
On that note, we'll move on to a break. There's more Open Court, the owner's edition from Las Vegas, coming up.
When I took over the Mavs, it was right after we had been voted the worst professional sports franchise of the 90s, right? And nobody believed that we were ever going to be any good. The very first game I was in charge, I put my email up on the Jumbotron, and it's been available and readily available ever since.
In those teams as well. To what extent do you listen, Jeannie, to their suggestions, their wants, their desires, or do you have to have tunnel vision and go about it the way you want to go about it?
I think any person in my position would be foolish not to listen. And you know, there's a difference between the fans and then there's your customers. And your customer, I think of the season C holders as our customers, because they're writing checks for the tickets every year. And to get their feedback and hear what they have to say, whether it's positive or negative, you got to take that in. You can't be afraid of it.
I mean, I'd echo what Jeannie said, particularly on the actual ticket buyer, et cetera. There's an experience that's all important. In terms of, like, what should you do with the team fans, I think it's great to hear. I mean, the truth is they all contradict each other anyway, and that's okay. But to listen to sentiment doesn't mean you have to do what sentiment says, but to understand that, to know where you agree, to learn with what you can, to know how you need to tell your story if you decide to take a somewhat different direction. I think it's one of the things that I think is cool about this business that I never saw before, is your fans actually pretty much can know almost anything that your general manager can do. Almost anything.
Almost, yeah.
There are fans who spend as much time almost, frankly, of the Clippers studying. Let's hear what they have to say.
There's something about the NBA different than any sport where I don't know, the people who know about this league and the depth that they go, some fans, it's shocking how deep the knowledge is. And I think the internet obviously has made that easy and more accessible. And I think there's two rules in business anyway: love your people and love your customers, and that's where it starts and ends. And so, again, anything, there used to be, again, when we first started, there's a lot of front offices believing in what they called the bunker mentality. It means, wall off your team in a bunker and having nothing to do with their business people, nothing to do with the league, nothing to do with the media, nothing to do with your fans. I mean, it couldn't be, furthest from what at least we would want to do. And I don't think you survive long term with that kind of view. So I think you got to listen. Doesn't mean, like you said, you have to act on it, but you got to listen.
Sure. Mark, you've been responsive to fans in terms of fan experience, I know, over the years. Well, what about when it comes to their opinions on what's happening on the court?
I mean, you listen and you pay attention. Every now and then, over the years, I've gotten ideas. We pulled off an 8-player trade one year early on because somebody suggested something. I thought that's a great idea, and so we ended up doing it. But to me, the ultimate challenge and what I really look for when I communicate is the emotional connection. The one thing, and I say it all the time, I don't own the Dallas Mavericks. I'm just responsible for the financials. And on the court, the community, North Texas owns the Dallas Mavericks.
All 30 franchises have to listen to their fan base. All right, there's just no doubt. The question and the problem I've had, again, being somewhat new in the process over the past 2 years, is there are two types of fans that I've interacted with generally. One that is spend the most money, win as much as you can. Great. That was the kind of fan I was just 2.5 years ago, I might add. So just spend as much money as you can and win as many games. And the other, which is a little bit more difficult to convince, but listen to the plan. We have a plan. We're trying to build something, and it does take a little bit more time than most or many of our fans might acknowledge. But those are the two types you're interacting with. And the truth is, you have to treat both with great respect.
And Philly kind of helped us, didn't they? The whole trust the process thing.
Definitely.
I don't agree necessarily with the approach, but they branded it. And if you're going to go through that process, they made it a little bit easier.
Everybody has an opinion, and you get to hear it. And there's both sides. So I know I like to listen to all the fans, good and bad. I read everything. You have to be pretty good at compartmentalizing and not getting upset when they say critical things or you don't agree with or whatever. Mm-hmm. But I think you do sometimes learn things that can help you in your business. And I've actually made decisions sometimes when I have a couple fans that are really smart and they've made some incredibly good suggestions. But I will tell you, I've been on the other side of this too. When I first bought the team, I was booed by 20,000 of them live.
And when you speak of Warriors history, there's no one
That was a moment that I'll never forget. The organization had been, terrible for 19 years. It made the
We
playoffs
liked you so much better when you guys were terrible, though.
I know.
Clippers too.
But once
made
19
our life so much
years,
easier.
and I had to bear the brunt of that, and I learned a lot from that experience. To listen to everybody. I returned all those emails. I'm sure I know, Mark, I took a lot from at least what I've heard, what you do. Respond to almost every email I get to this day. And I think that kind of interaction the fans like.
Jeannie, how much responsibility do you feel to make yourself available, even when things aren't going well?
I feel that it's important that I'm approachable and accessible to our fans. I read everything that's sent to me on Twitter. And sometimes I'm like, oh, this person hates me. And then I click on their profile and they're a Celtics fan. Well, of course they're going to say terrible things. That makes sense. So I want the fans to be Laker fans, but really what's most important is that they're NBA fans, that they love their team and they can hate my team. That's okay, as long as they care about basketball and the NBA.
Yeah, when I took over the Mavs, it was right after we had been voted the worst professional sports franchise of the 90s. Right? And nobody believed that we were ever going to be any good, right? And I remember walking in and said, I'm responsible. If you have a problem with Microsoft, if you hit Ballmer or Gates, they're going to take your call. If you hit Michael Dell, they're going to take your call because they're ultimately responsible. I can't just say the coach, because at the end of the day, now it'll be 18 years, I'm the guy who has to be responsible. And so the very first game I was in charge, I put my email up on the Jumbotron. And it's been available and readily available ever since, because I have to be the responsible. Now, a lot of people don't agree with that, and a lot of things have evolved over that period of time. But, you know, my coach is going to talk basketball. He's going to tell you about the game. If you're talking about anything strategic, portfolio management, chances are that's going to be me. If it's about why we picked a player, that's Donnie, right, our GM/president. But I'm the portfolio manager. It's my fund, right? I'm responsible for it. And if you have a question, it's ultimately going to be on me because I'm the only guy I know that's going to be there for a long, long time.
You know, first game of the year, I'm going to do exactly. I'm going to put your email on.
Sorry, I couldn't get any more.
I think we all should do it.
I'm going to see if we can
do it.
I'm going to see if we can put your email on the bottom of the screen during the show, if that's okay with you.
Mark.Cuban at DallasMavs.com.
No, I just
Palmer at Clippers.com.
There you go. We'll take a break. One more segment coming with our owners here on Open Court.
Joe Lacob at Cavs.com.
I don't have
And I haven't been to the finals like, you know, basically everyone. Tony and I guess the two who haven't. I can't imagine what that's like, but I can imagine getting pretty juiced up.
You think?
On the positive.
I
As well as
You know what?
well as depressed.
You might not make it through. I don't know the way you read.
Final few minutes here with our owners on Open Court from Las Vegas. Thanks again for all of you for being here. Tony, what causes you more sleepless nights? Your basketball business or your other business?
I think my basketball business, strangely enough, which I did not anticipate. But listen, it's like anything else. When you love something, you get obsessed about it. At least I do. And I love what I do for my day job. But basketball and having an NBA franchise, it's not a day job. It's a day job. It's a night job. It's a morning job. You think about it all the time, about the things you should do or the things that you didn't do that you should have done. And it takes on a remarkable amount of your focus, at least for me. And I did not expect it to be that consuming, but it is. You're dealing with an incredibly fun and incredibly exciting business, but that you have to be on your best at all times.
This past draft process, you know, we had the number 2 pick, and I was, Magic asked me to meet all the young recruits that they brought in to work out, and so I met some great kids and realized that they're about to embark on their dream, you know, the thing that they've worked their whole life for, and they're about to get drafted. And I just think about how precious these careers are, and they're very short, 10, 12, in Kobe's case, 20 years, which is so rare. And, you know, just making sure that they get all the opportunities to fulfill their dreams. And I guess that's what I worry about is I just want, you know, I want everybody to do the best that they can and stay healthy.
I always say this, what is great about this business and is so unusual is that it is the only business I've ever been involved in, and been involved in a lot of companies, that you get results like every day. Like you don't have to wait for the quarterly report. Yep. You get it when you feel it, right? You are winning, you lose it, you hear the comments, you whatever. That's an unbelievable thing. And also the media, social media. I mean, what other business? Like every decision you make is instantaneously available almost to everybody. And so it's so immediate. It's so real time. It's so consuming. I have to say, I sleep well these days anyway. But it wasn't like that 5 years ago, I can assure you. So
or last year.
Yeah. Or last year. I did sleep okay, man. I did sleep okay.
At least a couple of nights you must have stayed up.
We'll talk about that offline. But truthfully, that is what is so different about this business, and I think that we all love it for that. It's just there's nothing that can compare to it. It's an adrenaline rush all the time.
Mark, for you, the stress level in real-life business and basketball?
Losing kills me. Kills me. Kills me. It took me 15 years before I could sleep after a game we lost. Regular season, playoffs, worst.
Especially home games, right?
No, any games, right? Any games, right? Yeah. Destroyed me, right? And then, you know, as my kids got a little older, I had to force myself to change so they didn't feel it, right? But, you know, if a game ended at 10 and I would drive around for 2 hours, I would, you know, do whatever till 3 in the morning. I mean, it just tore me apart thinking, what could I have done differently? And that's why, you know, you see all the different stress levels. Like watching Steve, I see a little bit of me because we're watching any of us really, because when the game is on the line, right? When the game starts, best of hopes, but we know we really can't do anything more, right? It's completely out of our control. But for us, more than anybody in the world, for each of our teams, when that ball is in the air, there is more stress penned up in you than you could ever possibly imagine. And only in our minds is everything dependent on whether that ball goes through the hoop or bounces off the rim. The most relieved I've ever been, the year we won, the most relieved point, the happiest point / relief point was when there was 30 seconds to go in the game and we were up 11, and that was the first time I let myself believe that we could win. And the fact you could just see me just screaming, and there's a picture of me just screaming because it wasn't so much that I was happy, it was that I was relieved, right? Because every instance of every game is pure stress. And these guys will tell you, losing is far more painful than winning is joyful.
Last year with us, with Cleveland, and there was so much joy in that city. I mean, maybe sports probably should not matter as much as it does. I mean, you sort of hate to say that. Maybe that's blasphemy here, but it probably shouldn't. But it does, and there's not. I mean, that's just the way it is, and it does. And when you saw 1.3 million people, it was like, talk about a burden. And you looked into their eyes in this parade. I'll never forget that the rest of my life. I mean, I can almost get just goosebumps thinking about it, not because of us, but because of the burden that was lifted. That's what sports can do for a city, man, and can do for a town. So it takes on, you know, something much bigger than the court. You're representing a city.
Steve, you relating to this joy versus despair?
Yeah, I don't like losing very much. I sleep well, not because I don't care. I feel like I better sleep well because otherwise I can't get back to obsessing the next day. I don't have my energy to try to be as good a fan as I can be the next day, and I'm blessed with the ability to sleep, and I like that. But you know, for me, it's about, you know, thinking things. You know, I wake up first thing in the morning. I don't know what I thought I was sleeping well, but there'll be an idea in my head, and boom, you know, I'm texting something out just that quick. So I like the winning. I hate the losing. I really hate the losing. You know, the best we've done since I've been an owner is get to the second round of the playoffs. I can still see every part of the trajectory of the shot that Chris Paul had to make in our game against San Antonio. And I haven't been to the finals like, you know, basically well, Tony and I guess the two haven't, but, you know, I can't imagine what that's like. But I can imagine getting pretty juiced up.
You think?
On the positive.
I can imagine you that way too.
As well as depressed.
You might not make it through. I don't know the way you're
worried about it, man.
I can imagine that too. The juiced up part in particular.
Yes,
this has been fascinating. Picking your brains, getting into your processes, really appreciated. Steve, Jeannie, Tony.